Farah, let's begin with the state of the Muslim world, the Arab world, which, from the quotes that I pulled from the introduction, is, you call it a diseased body, but it's also a created body by Western powers, propped up by Western powers. You grew up in Jordan. The Hashemite rulers of Jordan were imposed on the Jordanian people. Jordan didn't exist, of course, at the beginning. Transjordan, whatever you want to call it. They are from Saudi Arabia. The oil interests created the rulers of the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And this has just been a kind of legacy, whether it's Sisi in Egypt or any other kind of pliant ruler. So let's talk about the state of the Arab world, and let's talk about, and we were together in Jordan this summer, the failure on the part of Arab rulers to push back in any, with the exception of Yemen, of course, push back in any meaningful way against the genocide of the Palestinian people, and then in many cases actually collaborate with the Zionists to overcome the maritime blockade imposed by Yemen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris, for having me and the generous introduction. Really, it's if you ask any person in Gaza, they will tell you that the thing that hurt them the most was not the American, German, and Israeli bombs. It was the cowardice of kin. It was the collusion. It was the abandonment with this kind of Zionist campaign to exterminate them. That is what is the source of their true emotional and psychological scar. So to say that the Muslim community worldwide is stuck between a rock and a hard place is probably the understatement of this century. So if it isn't these bombs, quadcopters, drones that are shredding our bodies and burning our children alive, it's these colonially installed puppets that look towards this a model of empire and salivate over it, competing in who gets to please it the most and who gets to bend over to be compliant towards it. So these security states have our people strangulated, whether it is through surveillance, repression, or intimidation. And if it isn't the horrific Sidnaya prison that we've seen footage of and other sadistic torture dungeons under Assadist Syria, it is the hundreds of other unknown torture cells still operating in the West Bank, Egypt, Saudi, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Jordan, East Turkestan, and India, Kashmir, where political prisoners are detained by the hundreds and held under gruesome conditions, often without charge. So if it isn't that, it's the Israeli soldiers that relish in breaking the bones of Palestinian children prisoners. It's the Taiman concentration camp where Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya was abducted over a week ago with no word from him, and where Dr. Adnan al-Bursh of a Shifa hospital was brutally raped and killed before him. It is the crude and sadistic Israeli parliamentarian urge to protect the so-called right to rape. If not that, it is the moral stain of Abu Ghraib. It is the Patriot Act that detains people like Dr. Afia Siddiqui, the rest of the Holy Land Five, and men like Abu Zubaydah, Guantanamo's so-called forever prisoner, or America's tortured guinea pig, who still resides in Guantanamo since 2002, and who we forget is of Palestinian descent himself. So this, like you rightly pointed out, Krish, this systemic repression that Muslim communities worldwide experience is inextricably linked to the interventionist, expansionist, supremacist American, Israeli, Western project. In a twisted way, they kind of all work together like this pharaoh behemoth protected by Orwellian buzzwords like liberal democracy or state sovereignty or the so-called rules-based order, which Gaza has exposed as nothing but a ruse-based order. So it is as if this entire ecosystem of repression feeds on injustice. And we've reached the abyss of repression. And this world order is this Frankenstein-like world, whose horrors have been unleashed primarily on innocence. So what the great African American theologian James Cone called structural sin, we've reached an alarming level of that, of desensitization to atrocious mass violence. And what does all of this do? It kills and strangulates all of us, not just Muslims. It produces this endemic spiritual death, which affects not only Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians, but humanity as a whole. So this pernicious web of carceral cancer is sustained by the politics of compliance to an empire which sees like Muslims like me, Palestinians and Arabs as mere fodder for this monstrous system. Nowhere is this collusion more evident than things like basic human rights and civil liberties being eroded in the West. Look at the state of Muslims in Germany. Or just last week, I think a senator from Florida, Randy Fine, tweeted essentially a final solution, a call for a final solution, saying that it's high time we dealt with this fundamentally dangerous culture, i.e. Islam. Well, what I would say to that is, what is fundamentally dangerous and broken of a culture is one that has normalized genocide, one that is okay with watching images of people being burned alive and moving on with their day. That is what is fundamentally broken, and that is what is dangerous. So this manufacturing, decades of manufacturing, the Muslim menace, this idea of the war on terror, or let's change that proposition and call it a war of terror, a war of state terror that has Muslim political prisoners locked up and exterminated. This same campaign also sustains and funds the Israeli occupation of Palestine and the ongoing land grab, annexation, and colonization of land in Syria and Lebanon. And so all of this is part of a campaign to dominate and redraw the Middle East, straight out of a 21st century crusader, Zionist colonial playbook. Except this campaign is more militarized, it's more advanced, it's more funded and supremacist than ever before. So I don't think that this is a controversial point, Chris, but I wrote this in my Substack that we are currently living in an age of Muslim internment, but we don't call it as such. We've reached a point where we have normalized the genocide and extermination of a people deemed to be bad wholesale according to the logic of the Judeo-Western Christian civilization. So, yes.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that since World War II, we've primarily normalized seeing images of torture, basically on Muslim bodies, from Bosnia, Abu Ghraib, the Rab'a massacre, West Bank, and now in Gaza, the Rohingya, the Uyghurs. So it's definitely a time of harrowing sort of desensitization and dehumanization on a global systemic level.